Book of Shadows, Blair Witch 2 is a 2000 release psychological horror directed by Joe Berlinger.
Yeah, as you can tell from the title, it's a sequel to the Blair Witch Project, but it's not a follow-on as such. It sort of treats the Blair Witch Project as a film. So it's the Blair Witch Project is a film within a film, effectively, in this sequel. So what it looks at is the town of Burkittsville, where the original film was set, and the effect that it has on the residents there. The same as it did in real life. It suddenly became a tourist attraction. Lots of people wanted to see, where this film was set, and all the sort of the little industries that popped up in the wake of it. So you've got people selling merchandise, T-shirts, and all the little wooden figures and things like that, and people doing tours as well of the woods. I mean, I don't know, obviously there was lots of merchandise whether they did tours. I don't know whether that actually happened. It wouldn't surprise me if it did, though. But yeah, so that's the sort of the basis of the story. So we follow Jeff, who runs one of these tours called the Blair Witch Hunt, and he's taken a group of people along. There's a couple who are writing a book by the name of Stephen and Tristan, and then there's Erica, who is a Wiccan, and then there's Kim, who is like a sort of a psychic goth, your typical sort of late 90s, early noughties looking goth. Lots of makeup, dressed in black, as a typical goth of any time, really. So yeah, they head into the woods. And they go to the ruins of a house, which is not featured in the original film. I can't remember if it's mentioned or not. But straight away, there's something strange going on, because there's a big tree in the middle of this house. A tree that would have been there when the house was built, but it's right in the middle of sort of the walls. So Jeff's like, this wasn't here before, I'm sure. And it's impossible for this to have been here, because it's the house wouldn't have been here. Anyway, that's quickly ignored, and they set up camp. They set up loads of cameras. Obviously, this is Blair Witch, so you've got to have cameras everywhere to record every second of everything. They then, make a fire, have some food, and drink lots of alcohol and smoke lots of marijuana. So when they wake up in their woozy state in the morning, the camp is wrecked. There's, all the notes from this couple have made for their book are completely ripped up and flying around the place. And the cameras are wrecked. But someone's put the tapes in the same place where the tapes allegedly were found from the original recordings, from the original film. They head back to Jeff's place and start looking at the tapes, and they find strange happenings going on. The film treats the original movie as a movie, so there's not supposed to be a witch, but obviously there is something strange going on, and people keep saying, oh, we've brought something back with us, etc, etc. So somebody's either possessed or something. Weird things start happening.
They do, indeed. So we've drifted into March, and
Yep.
This month, we're going to continue doing themed months for the time being. So we've decided to do a month of sequels. A bit random, but we thought about doing it quite a while ago anyway. So we're going to do 4 weeks, 4 sequels, random sequels. We thought we'd start with this one. I think this was actually suggested to us. Is that right?
It was somebody on Twitter suggested it. Yeah, that we should check it out. That it's underrated and unfairly maligned for being rubbish. So yeah, I think it definitely has its fans out there. I've never watched it. I mean, mainly because of the terrible reviews. It came very quickly after the original. It was only the following year that it came out. But I think because it wasn't a follow-on as such, like I say, it treats the original movie, like a movie. So it wasn't strictly a normal sequel. I never really bothered with it until now. Yeah,
I hadn't seen it. I mean, I saw the original when it was released, or around the time it was released. I haven't seen it since that time. I've literally just seen it the once and never saw the sequel. I liked the original, I think. I seem to remember not liking the end of it, the last scene. But what I really loved about the original one was the build-up before the film. And I think I've said before on the channel, we must have covered something else similar. But I fell for it, hook, line and sinker. I remember because I had the internet. It was around the time, was it 99 it came out, wasn't it?
It was 99.
Which was, I think, that was the year I got my first home computer. I really went for it, and I believed it, and felt like a complete idiot that I'd been sucked into it when I finally watched it. There was another film that came out around that time called Last Broadcast, which I also really liked. But Blair Witch is obviously the one that I think there were rumours which one came first, something like that. But Blair Witch was obviously the one that took off, and rightly so, because the way they marketed it was amazing, and they really kind of hooked into how the internet was at that point. I don't know whether it would work today. The internet is such a different place with social media, but this was before. It was the early days of the internet, and they really hooked into what the internet was and how it worked, and they really fooled people, I think. And I enjoyed the market. I enjoyed the run up to the film, but then I skipped over this one. I never saw this one. I was quite interested to learn before I watched this for the video that it was Joe Berlinger, because of course Joe Berlinger directed Paradise Lost, which is an incredible documentary about Damien Eccles and then the two young men who were arrested for murder, and obviously they spent many years in prison before they were released a number of years ago. And he made the famous, I think there were 3 of them, weren't there? He documented the trial and everything. That's fascinating, really interesting films that he made. He also made Brother's Keeper, which is another excellent documentary. He recently made the Ted Bundy film, which I think was he hasn't made many feature films.
I think this and the Ted Bundy one are pretty much the only ones. I think everything else he's done is a documentary.
Yeah, the only feature films. I mean, he's a documentary filmmaker, and so I was really interested going into this because I was, I grew up. I've watched Paradise Lost a few times. I had it on DVD. Really good documentary. This was kind of weird. I mean, it kind of worked and it kind of didn't work. I have to say the parts I really liked were the stuff at the beginning. Yeah. The documentary stuff, and then there's a bit further on in the film which features news reporters. The camera kind of goes along looking at all these news reporters. That was great, and then the rest of it just felt like that kind of an annoying early 2000s, late 90s teen horror films, which we were just overdone with. They've made so many of them, obviously coming off the back of Scream. I mean, this felt more like a sequel to a film like Scream than the Blair Witch Project, which was a shame, because you think someone like Joe Berlinger could have come in and done something really interesting with it, being that he was a documentary filmmaker. And I did read it. I found an interesting interview with him, and he said that I think his plans to originally, he wanted to make a film, and he went into, is it Artisan who released this film?
Yeah.
He got into their like head offices, and he found himself in like the head office. And he was like, oh, I can pitch my film. So he pitched his film, and they were like, no, that's not why you're here. You're here because we want you to make the sequel to Blair Witch Project. And he was like, oh, I don't want to do that. And they were like, well, that's what you get. That's what you're going to do. Bloody film producers. Or film studio, should I say. But he went away, and I think he put together an idea. He gave them a film, but I think they recut it. So because they wanted it to be more like the kind of teen horror that were also big at that point. And so I have a feeling there was maybe something else interesting in there. He made an interesting point about the original Blair Witch. He really liked the original Blair Witch film, but he didn't like the way that was looked on as being documentary footage, because he says documentary filmmakers, they make films to look as beautiful as feature films. They don't do it in that annoying, shaky kind of found footage way. So I believe that there was possibly something else in this film, but what we got was a bad Scream type, or we know what you did last summer, or any of those many films that just kind of got saturated the whole of the early 2000s period. And then on top of that, it did that kind of thing that all movies, all those teen horrors did, which was just like fill it with like rock music, new metal, and
as soon as Marilyn Manson plays over the opening credits, I was like, oh right, okay, I know what we're in for now.
System of a Down were in there, Queens of the Stone Age were in there. It was almost too much. It was just like there to fill up the soundtrack with cool music, And
the other thing is, it immediately ages the film, because you know exactly when it was made. So I think what it was supposed to be, what he envisaged it to be, was like a comment on the sort of hysteria around the film, and the sort of blurring of reality and fiction, which it there are elements of that in there. It too many times it just falls back into the usual tropes, and presumably in part because of some studio interference and obviously some extra footage that was filmed and put in. I mean, the character of Jeff, I think part of the new stuff was was a lot of the stuff at the beginning where you see him like in a psychiatric hospital. But that's not really, and I think it's mentioned again later on by another character, but it doesn't really have any bearing on anything apart from, well, you questioning his sanity, I suppose. It's kind of odd and it doesn't really fit with anything else, and that's because it was obviously completely separate and just put in for some strange reason. I mean, whether it's supposed to make you think, is it all in their heads? Is it some sort of mass hysteria that's, you know, some sort of shared experience and there's nothing really going on? I mean, a lot of it obviously is, I mean, it's not ambiguous, but obviously, without giving anything away, what you see on screen sometimes then turns out not to be how things occurred, but you're not really sure which version is real. I don't know. But it doesn't really come together completely, to be honest. It's, you know, it's an interesting idea, and certainly more interesting than just doing the same thing again, which obviously a lot of sequels would do, because having another 90 minutes of shaky camera footage in a wood is not going to be very interesting. You know, if you sent another 3 people into the woods to get lost and then find their footage, you're just repeating the same thing again. So certainly give it credit for trying something completely different. You know, there's obviously, since there's been another sequel about 5 years ago now, just simply called Blair Witch, you know, which was okay, but it does fall into that trap where it just repeats the same thing again. Obviously, they've got high-def cameras and they've got a drone and all this other stuff, but it doesn't really add anything to it. It's still people running around in the woods and disappearing and going in loops. But then they make the ultimate mistake of showing the monster. And it's like, I didn't need to see that. It's far scarier in the original when she's running through the woods going, what the hell's that? Ah! And you don't know what she's looking at. And that really, you know, sends shivers down your spine, because you know, she's so terrified. You can't even begin to imagine what they're running from. But as soon as you show it and you're like, oh, that's a bit of a rubbish CGI thing. You're like, that's not scary anymore. You know, as soon as you see that, it's like, oh, all tension and fear has gone.
I was reading that, like you said at the beginning, there is a following to this. It flopped when it came out. Obviously it was made. I think in the interview I saw with Joe Berlinger, you know, Artisan, they wanted to make a sequel, and they literally said to him when he said yes, okay, I'll do it. He said, oh, I'll go away and write an idea, and they were like, great, well, you can do it, but you've literally got to start filming in February because it's got to be released. It's got to be released October this year.
Crazy,
so they
absolutely
literally
crazy.
gave him no time to do it. But it has since gained a cult following. Now, whether it's gained a cult following because of the original one as well, I don't know. But to me, it's like, why did this gain a cult following? There are so many other good films around that. No, I got quite bored of a lot of those horror films that came out. But, you know, I mean, I know what you did last summer. I think that got a couple of sequels as well. The original one was a bit tacky. It was clearly, you know, off the back of the Scream idea. And they were going down
urban legend as well.
Urban legend, but some of them, they all had their own thing. They were all quite original, and a lot of them were very enjoyable. This, to me, it feels cheap, it feels rushed, and it just, I can't quite see what. I mean, I'm sure people have reasons for liking it. I'd love to know, and if you're one of those people that followed this and became a fan of this film, then please let us know.
I mean, I think it was, you know, I had very low expectations. You know, it was okay, it was fine, but it was like I said, as soon as the new metal kicks in, you're like, oh, okay, here we go. It just felt like everything else. And you know, like I said, give it credit for, you know, coming up with a completely different concept to a normal sequel. But yeah, the execution, well, obviously, you know, what Joe Berlinger went for and what came out obviously were two different things. If he was given the director's cut, how different it would be, whether it would be, you know, a masterpiece of filmmaking, I don't know. I don't know. But, you know, it's not like they reshot the whole thing, is it? No. Didn't really work for me overall.
And then it kind of all ends quite abruptly as well.
Yeah, a very abrupt ending.
Very abrupt ending, which kind of, you're like, oh, thank God it's ended. But at the same time, it's like, well, that didn't wrap anything up at all. And what? And I was so confused by the end of it.
I think the other thing is, there's sort of police interviews with some of the characters interspersed throughout the film. And they were supposed to be at the end. Oh, it was supposed to be like 20 minutes of this, you know, police interviews at the end of the film, which obviously would have been an ending of sorts. But no, again, that was something else the studio changed. They recut it, and they you know, cut bits of it and put it through the film. You know, he wanted just a sort of linear time, you know, where things went in the correct order. That's how he wanted it to work, but yeah, the studio changed that and cut these bits of interview in between.
And again, that would have been a lot more interesting because Joe Berlinger, like I said before, he was known for Paradise Lost, which was about teenagers being, you know, I mean, the whole thing behind that documentary is that they were coerced into their statements, and that, you know, that's why they were kind of strung up for something that they didn't do. That's why that section of the film was more interesting, because that's what Joe Berlinger was known for, and he could have done. So yeah, when it just kind of felt slotted in, that stuff to me I thought was really interesting.
If there was a director's cut, I would check it out, certainly, just to see what could have been. I doubt there ever will be, though. Let's face it.
No, but definitely,
So,
you know, do go, and there's some good interviews with Joe Berlinger on the internet. I would, you know, track if you're interested, track them down, have a read. I think they're quite fairly old now, or maybe some recent ones as well. But anyway, so we did this one. You don't have this on DVD, do you, or do you?
No, I don't.
No. So we did this because this was an Amazon Prime, although now it's not an Amazon Prime. I think we both managed. Yeah, something disappeared. We managed to watch it before it came off of Amazon Prime. So unfortunately, neither of us have it on DVD, and you can't watch it on Amazon Prime anymore. I don't think you can even rent it, but I think it's on Shudder. I think if you sign up to Shudder on Amazon Prime, or you're signed up to Shudder, then you can watch it on there. But
I mean, I'm sure you can pick up the DVD pretty cheap. It's not like it's in high demand, is it? So,
can you? Are there DVDs? What are there? Blu-ray?
Oh yeah, certainly
DVDs?
there's DVDs. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think when it was released originally, whether you could still get this version, I don't know. There was actually it was actually released with DVD on one side and CD on the other, and it had like 3 songs from the movie and some you know, some of the score, which I think that was the first time a disc like that had been released. I don't think many ever were. I haven't got anything like that in my collection. Now I've got double-sided discs, but only when it's like DVD, you know, it's full frame or widescreen on the other side. I don't think I've got any that's DVD on one side and CD on the other. So an interesting release. I mean, again, like the first film, there was a lot of marketing done. There was lots of internet stuff. You know, the first film was such a big money spinner, and you know, because it was so low budget, it made a hell of a lot of money. They wanted to get something into production as quickly as possible, and that's not always, you know, just to make more money, which is not always the best reason. You know, to have a sequel out in the following year, unless you have some sort of plan for it, yeah, it's not maybe the best idea. I mean, they approached the original guys who did the first one first, and they said that we're not ready. You know, we want it to die down a bit first before we think about a sequel. So Artisan just went, "Oh, sod you, we'll just do it anyway." So, yeah.
So that was Blair Witch 2, and as always, if you enjoyed the video, let us know in the comments below.
Hit the subscribe button there, and don't forget to push the bell for notifications. There's other videos to check out over here. Come and find us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram, and join us again next week for another video.